manager. But I'm the project manager here. I've been here since March and I really enjoy it, and I'm glad that you're all here.
And Leslie, you're on the team too. Why don't you?
Hi, my name is Leslie Politosh. I am the community connector at the Economic Development Alliance. And yeah, glad to be here and sharing some resources at some point down the line.
Awesome. And I'm going to share my screen for a moment. We'll do a couple little screen shares. We don't really have a presentation here. We've got a couple documents and we'll put some PDF links in the chat. But just kind of going over our short agenda. We're going to start off in a few moments hearing from Commissioner Katie Jacobson, newly re-elected Commissioner Katie Jacobson. And then you'll have an opportunity to ask some questions of her. We're going to talk about the large grant, what that looks like. We'll go over the scoring review and some of the criteria and eligibility and things like that for the grant program. Sarah's going to take us through some application tips. I'll go through some tips that are a little bit more specific towards this grant program. We'll give you a couple hints on how to apply using the Smartsheet application portal, and then we'll have some time for questions. We're going to keep this as a high signal to noise ratio as possible. And just a couple points of clarification. The way the process for this works is that grants are submitted online via the county's portal. We'll get the link up there in a moment, and I'll stick the agenda in the chat as well so you can refer back to that. The deadline for submissions is Tuesday, December 13th at 5 p.m. What happens after that is our staff works through all the applications, putting them in the proper format, downloading them, all the things like that. We go through and make sure all applicants are eligible. That is, you're a nonprofit or a municipality or a governmental organization or a cooperative, that you're in good standing. We also work with our county partners to make sure that there aren't any outstanding taxes with the county, things like that. We put everything together and get that off to our board of directors, who will evaluate and score the grants individually. And our staff, Leslie, Sarah, and I have no say in the scoring or anything like that. We are merely paper shufflers and organizers. And we are also advocates for you guys, the applicants. We want to make sure that your grant applications that you put in stand the best chance possible to wow our board and score well. Then what happens is our board will come together at a board meeting early in the year to discuss their scoring and come to a consensus of basically scoring and recommendations for funding based on the grant pool. I take that to a county commissioners meeting to make our recommendations to the commissioners. The final decision for awarding any of those grants is the commissioners, and generally they look at our recommendations, and probably the next meeting or two after that is when they will make their award notifications, and then the notifications go out from the county. So that's a little bit on the logistics of it. We'll get a little bit more in the weeds, but I wanted to give Commissioner Jacobson a little bit of time to introduce herself and talk a little bit about the grant program writ large and some of the commissioners' goals and desires, and then we'll give you guys a chance to ask Commissioner Jacobson some questions. So take it away.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks for having me here. I'm Katie Jacobson. I'm one of the Lincoln County Commissioners here. So Paul gave me some little talking points here that I'll just start with. So, you know, the goals of this program have always been community and economic development program. The funds come from both a combination of transient room lodging tax and lottery dollars that we can spend on economic and community development activities. This is not our social service program. So we do have a social service and nonprofit grant that we do at a different time of the year. And that is not this. So if you are here thinking you're going to apply for social services, wrong grant. We usually have a couple of mess ups every year. People just kind of get confused. So I think it's important that everyone understands that now. That doesn't mean that you cannot be a nonprofit or can't be a nonprofit to apply to this, but this is, again, economic and community development, not social service stuff. So if you're applying for a homeless shelter, not the right grant program. So 2 years ago, I guess this is the second year, so a year ago, after Commissioner Hunt had a series of listening and learning sessions across the county, asking citizens and the public what they wanted us to focus on in terms of economic development. That was the question on the table. The three answers, top answers we got back were housing, childcare, and broadband. That's what the public wanted us to spend our resources on, is housing, childcare, and broadband for economic development. So we decided to try to take the resources that we had for those three things. We would pull apart a larger part off of this grant program and really focus on those things. So last year we pulled, I think it was $60,000. Help me if I'm wrong, Paul. Okay, for either a childcare, broadband, or housing project. And last year a broadband project was awarded. The goal of that larger program is always to move the ball forward on one of those three things. So not station keeping, not funding an existing program to do the same thing it's already done, but to either lay more cable for broadband and have more people have access to that, to increase the housing stock we have in the county, or increase childcare slots. So that's really the focus of that larger grant, is to move something forward. This year, you may notice that the childcare piece is not in this grant because we were able to use some American Rescue Plan Act dollars. So hopefully coming in the months of December or January, we will have a separate grant program just for childcare businesses. So we felt like we didn't need to put childcare in this one because we have a separate grant we're going to do just for childcare businesses here in the next month or two. So really that larger grant is just focused on broadband or housing projects. And then the rest of the money is kind of our more traditional community and economic development projects. Another question Paul wanted me to answer is, what does an ideal project look like to you? I think we see a lot of projects in this grant program that are kind of the same organization asking for the same money every single year to do the same thing. And while we do have some really awesome programs in the county that we recognize need funding every year, for me, this is speaking for Katie, I always like to see something new, something innovative, something we haven't funded before, maybe an organization we haven't funded before. This shouldn't just be, in my opinion, the same organization getting the same money every single year for doing the same thing, but different organization or same organization, maybe trying something different. I think cost matching is always a really important thing. We want to see that these dollars are being leveraged as best they can. So if you have a $20,000 project and you're just asking us for $20,000, in my opinion, like you should be cost matching that. You should be trying to piece together different sources and being competitive in how you're doing that. So I think showing that maybe you're asking us for $20,000, but it's a $60,000 project and you have grant requests out to other things or volunteer hours or however you're doing that, and that this money is leveraging something forward. I think that's always ideal. I think that the project is measurable. So what is it really doing? I think that's an important question to ask yourself. And how do we know that it's doing that? Certain things are easy, like you want new windows in the community center. Well, how do we know we're done? Because we have new windows. But sometimes the projects are less clear than that, right? Like you want to attract new people in for an event. Well, how do we know? How are you measuring that people came or whatever it is? So I think sometimes when the projects are a little more abstract, people have a tendency to kind of shy away from giving measurable impacts. But I think it's really important so that we know what it is we're buying with the money, and then how do we know we got there? Not just for this project, but I think if you're thinking, you want to do something like that again, how do you know it was worth that investment? I think the other thing is, for those of you, I see some familiar faces here. For those of you that have had projects with us before, either for your social service nonprofit grant or for this one, make sure you've turned in those reports. That's like something I always personally check on, is if you couldn't follow up and give us your final report last time, in my opinion, it's like, I don't really want to give you money again, because that was part of the agreement last time, is to tell us what you did with that. So if you haven't done that before you apply again, I'd go check and see if you put in that final report. And this year, Paul sort of mentioned this, but we did have a situation come up with this grant where we did have an entity that we actually granted money in a past year that then we realized owed us quite a bit of money in back taxes. And so this year, for every entity that applies, we are going to be checking to make sure that we're not giving someone money that actually owes us money. So if you owe any back taxes, you might want to check on that as well. So that's kind of my ideal as an ideal project. I don't think there's one specific thing in my mind that is ideal. I think it's just, again, cost matching, something maybe innovative, that's measurable, and that, you know, you've done your reporting and completed stuff in the past so that you're ready to go this next time. So that's kind of all my talking points I had, and that Paul wanted me to cover, and I'm happy to open it up to questions if anyone has any.
And one thing I was thinking, Katie, is maybe I'll go to Leslie in a second, but maybe I'll talk a little bit about some more of the specifics about the big grant programs, because that might lead to some questions.
Sure.
For you. So, but Leslie, you got your hand up, your Mickey Mouse hand is up. So what's up?
Hey, I just had a quick question for Katie. This is my first go around with the economic grant helping, but I've been on the social service agency grant committee for 3 years. And this is the first time I've heard about a reporting requirement for folks that have gotten that grant. So I just wanted to, I guess, clarify that that is the thing, or yeah, that was the first I've heard about that part.
Yep, we do require people to report back. It's part of using public funds. So the process is pretty simple.
Mm-hmm.
So we do have a form people can use, but a lot of times, honestly, it's kind of just an email.
Okay.
That says, hey, we did the project. Here's the picture of the new windows, or here's the thing. Or hey, like what we're kind of seeing from last year is with our large grant program we funded for broadband. There was, of course, some infrastructure, delays in getting the equipment there because of supply chains. It was just like, hey, we're not done yet, but things are ordered. We're waiting for them, et cetera, et cetera. So that is a requirement on all the money that we give out, that people report back. And I think there's definitely a little room for improvement on compliance, but this is not a super hard report back. Like I said, this can be, as simple as an email back to Paul or back to me or, county manager, just saying this is what we did with those funds.
Great. And thanks for answering that. Like I said, that was a question about the social service agency grants. And I know we've been working on trying to improve that program with some consulting. So I guess my take back for the committee for next year on that program is seeing if we can also get, make sure that we know if people followed through as well. But thank you for clarifying. And again, that was for the social service agency grant program, which is a different one. Thank you, Katie.
Thanks.
And just kind of getting a little bit into the larger projects, which this year we came up with we're calling them impact projects. And we're focusing on broadband and housing. And, how do you know that your project is something that will fit in this? And one of the things that I think is key that Commissioner Jacobson pointed out is we don't want these funds to be just carrying on an existing program or something that kind of drops off. And like, what do I mean by something that drops off? Well, in broadband, one thing that you could say if you're trying to increase access is we're going to subsidize your broadband costs if you're below a certain income level for X number of months. That's not really a sustainable thing that we want to see out of this grant program, because that just ends when the grant ends. So on the broadband front, what we're really looking at And I'm going to toss up, this is a document that is, we'll be referring to later. It's up on the county website, and I put the portal link up there. But it kind of goes into this, but for the broadband, it's really looking at ways to have a measurable positive impact in the access or affordability of broadband in Lincoln County. So that could be something like laying cables. It's not something that you want to have be short-term, but really this is kind of a single project here. So that could be something like equipment purchases, laying cable, laptop purchases, and the support system that comes back, comes behind that to support those. So really it also, the broadband should demonstrate an awareness of what's actually going on in Lincoln County currently, because there is a lot of broadband funding coming down. There is a regional broadband action team. So that's just kind of but the real thing there is enhancing the access or affordability, but not temporarily. For housing, it's looking at creating a measurable increase in housing units in Lincoln County with a focus on working Lincoln County families. There are other great grant programs that can provide a lot of different projects that are not what we're looking for here, but it's basically looking at moving that needle forward. And once again, I think the commissioners are really looking for some outside of the box thinking here, and are very flexible and open to things, as is our board who scores this, but also trying to be, very reasonable. In a general timeline, we're talking about these grant funds being expended in the next fiscal year. But there are times when, like supply chain issues or something like that, those are times when you communicate back to either us or the commissioners. And a lot of times it'll be a question that the commissioners will need to answer, but I've worked with a number of you who maybe had to readjust some of your grant deliverables. I've kind of helped you put those together and get those in front of the commissioners. So we're here to support. But I guess on the broadband and housing, again, we're talking about one grant award for this year, to the level of $60,000. And I guess I would pause for a moment and go, either for myself or Commissioner Jacobson, are there any specific questions on that larger impact grant pool? The sound of silence, which either means, Katie, you and I answered questions so well, or we completely baffled people, which both could happen.
I think it's probably the latter, unfortunately.
And again, this is just the second year that this larger pool has happened. So this is something that we're trying to work with, supporting the county and help them with this experiment to see if the needle can be moved and allow access to some more innovative projects. One thing I'm going to throw in here, and this is going to happen three times during this video, and I see a hand up, but I'm going to throw out an odd little keyword every once in a while, and I'll tell you why later. But right now, odd keyword number one is buffalo. Martha, you have your hand up.
Yes, I do have a question about that larger grant. If would it be appropriate to apply for that grant if you were beginning but not completing a housing build, like perhaps you were going to prepare the site and build a foundation and wanted to do that, but you wouldn't finish the whole project yet in that fiscal year? Or maybe even develop a site plan for that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be possible, because obviously it takes a while to build something. So if maybe the whole project wouldn't be done in that fiscal year, but you could expend out the funds for the piece that you're, asking this grant program. So things that I think about that you could use this funding for would be like site due diligence, site control, or cost matching on a purchase, like technical assistance, architectural plans, cost matching for a larger project, right? Taking down trees to get ready to build, that kind of stuff. Those could all be things that could be working towards a larger piece of a housing project that I think you could use this money for, that would be moving towards, again, additional housing.
Thank you.
And I would think the emphasis on that would be making sure that you focus on what the end goal is that you're trying to reach towards, which is creating X number of new housing units or whatever that is. Leslie.
And I guess I just wanted to clarify, because I'm part of the Affordable Housing Partners Collaborative. I'm assuming workforce includes all those who work, even if that would be like a transitional housing project or something like that, with, you know, folks who are working lower income jobs.
I think that we've kept this is only our second year doing this, and we actually haven't funded a housing project out of this money yet, because we did broadband last year. So I think we're fairly open, and I think it would be up to, you know, the person proposing the project to explain what it is they're doing. But if someone was building, say, like temporary workforce housing for people that were coming in like as locums or something like that, I don't, for me personally, I can only speak for me, I wouldn't necessarily see that as a problem, because it's still helping fill that economic development role, which is what the citizens wanted us to do, was focus on housing in terms of economic development. So I mean, I would say it's kind of back on the person making the pitch to come up with a good pitch, but we have not funded, like I said, a housing project out of this money yet. So but I do think, I mean, this isn't rigid, maybe like some other programs.
Thank you, Katie.
Melissa, your hand is up.
Hello there. Just to throw out an idea related to housing and the Affordable Housing Partners Group, is tiny home development on a church property. Does it fit into this? Certainly people who experience homelessness are often working, and yet the tiny home isn't necessarily thought of as a permanent structure. So, but it's certainly folks are trying to think about that and pull that together in various places in Lincoln County. So wonder what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I guess my thoughts would be that, you know, that I think it's possible, but you're walking a kind of a fine line, because again, this is not our social service and nonprofit. You know, this is economic development. And so again, if you can kind of make the pitch that we're building homes, even temporary homes or tiny homes for workforce, for economic development, I think that's the pitch. But if this is the type of project that's working with people in a crisis that are going to need, you know, like social services and management, and maybe aren't part of a workforce, or, you know, it's a different model, then this may not be the right fit. Because again, this is economic development money. So I feel like as long as you can frame it on that piece, and that makes sense, and that's part of the goal of the project, is support people that are working, then I think that works. But I think it just depends on the project. Tiny homes in of themselves, to me, isn't exclusionary for people that are in the workforce, right? I think there's probably many of us on this call in the workforce that might live in a tiny home or have interest in that or whatever. So I don't think it's a tiny home itself. I think it's just the model that you are potentially looking at, and if that is more of a social service model or more of a workforce model.
Yeah, I hear you. It matters who the proposing entity is, and the framing and the style of housing. I hear you. Yep. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, let's kind of move on. I'm going to spend a little time kind of going over eligibility and the scoring criteria, so you kind of know how that's gonna go. You know, as far as Commissioner Jacobson mentioned this before, but this year there's $130,000. $60,000 is for one single grant in this highlight area we just talked about. There's a $70,000 pool that can go for smaller projects like the grant program has been funding for the last dozen or so years, up to a maximum of $15,000 per project. Eligible applicants are municipalities, governmental units, nonprofits. Those could be 501c3s or C6s, or cooperative nonprofits or other nonprofit entities. They don't have to necessarily be C3s. Also, the grant rules that have been in place for a while stipulate that public-private partnerships are welcome, but the applying entity would need to be a nonprofit or the municipality or a governmental unit to be the fiscal agent for that. And as far as looking at the scoring criteria, I'm going to hop up here and find where I'm going to share this document, and this link is in the chat, and this is also up on the county's webpage, but I'm just going to kind of talk this through. So this is the criteria that our board of directors use to evaluate and score these grants. Again, our staff has no say in the scoring, but a couple of the different things just so you can get a sense of what they're looking for. Criteria number one is the community and economic development impact. It's just, that is basically just like, what is the impact locally here of that project? And it's really not looking at, is this a community development project? Is this a hybrid? Is it economic development? But is this an impactful project? Criteria number two is there is an economic development bonus if this project is adding financial value to the local economy in the county, whether it's helping generate revenue, create jobs, retain jobs, build potential new positions through trade, tourism, or skill development. There's a special little bonus that's given to that, just because that's one of the things that our population said that they really wanted to see happening. There's also a score on collaboration. It's the realization that highly successful projects often have more than one partner. Doesn't necessarily have to be a co-applicant, but if you're working with multiple organizations or individuals, scoring wise, we do look at, is there collaboration? Again, we're also looking at funding sources. Are there multiple funding sources? And absolutely, there have been successful projects, wildly successful projects, where this grant has been the sole funding source. But in a perfect world, and I think Commissioner Jacobson would probably agree with me here, these funds would be ideal if they could leverage additional funds to have a higher impact project happen. And it also kind of shows that that organization or that applicant is going out there and trying to cast a wide net and not just going for the low hanging fruit as far as available funding. So there are scores given to the number of funding sources that you've got. Not really conversely, but in partnership to that, another area they look at is the economic impact of this grant program to the project. Really what they're looking for, and you hear this a lot in grant speak, the but for clause. But for this grant, this project could not happen. Is this grant going to be vital for the project even happening and being successful? Also on the budget, and we'll talk a little bit more about the budget down the road here, but is there a succinct, realistic, understandable budget? Does it feel like the numbers make sense, that they're not just guesstimated? Does it feel like all of the budget items have been included? And for our review committee, and they've done this for a number of years, it kind of stands out and screams at them when there's some stuff that's been forgotten. So just try to be as comprehensive as possible. You don't need to go down to the level of the individual stamp, but show that with your project, with what you're trying to do, you are covering all aspects in the money that you're looking for the larger complete project. And then there's the quality in terms of the impact to Lincoln County. This has some value, this is worthwhile, this has a strong value. And this is a subjective, obviously, criteria that our board discusses very actively, because we really want to do, the board really wants to benefit by a higher score those projects that are going to have the maximum impact. And once again, and we mentioned this before, is that there is a little score bonus for if you attended this workshop. It's just that sort of little carrot and stick kind of way to go forward. Now, what happens with these external larger impact grants, the broadband or the housing? Those go out to subject matter experts for an additional set of scoring. Because while our board, and if you want to know who's on our board and who's scoring, just go to businesslincolncounty.com, and you can just go to the About Us page and you can see who all's on our board. But these external reviewers just kind of give some insight beyond the expertise that we have in our board. So they actually kind of go, is there, they're looking at, is there a strong immediate within the grant period or once the period is done impact for the awarded dollars? They're also looking at the strength of this project. This is, again, that subjective, but it's showing, is this project going to have outstanding value in Lincoln County? And the final thing we ask the external score folks to do is write a short couple paragraphs of commentary. And then our board looks at that and go, are they showing support? Are they showing little support? Are they enthusiastic about this? And all of these subject matter experts are from folks outside of the county. They are they have no vested interest in the organizations that are applying here. They're just helping the commissioners and our board make sure that when the recommendations go to the commissioners, that they've been as vetted as carefully as possible. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen there, but this lets you kind of figure out in your best guess kind of what your grant will score like. And depending on the grant pool, I mean, this is a competitive grant program, but it's also one that we, if the project's strong, the commissioners and our board want to see all of those projects happen. But sometimes you have to kind of pick and choose depending on the number of applicants in the applicant pool. So this gives you some hints to actually go in there and put your best foot forward. And in a few seconds, I'm turning it over to Sarah. And a number of you work for nonprofits or organizations where you've been doing a lot of grant writing. And some of the things that Sarah's going to talk about and I'm going to talk about after it, if you've written a lot of grants, you probably already know this or sort of sleep with this already. But if you haven't written a lot of grants, these little pointers will hopefully help you create the best possible grant project. So Sarah, take it away, and I will put a link to the document that you're talking about up on screen.
Okay. Yeah, so we just wanted to share some good tips for putting the best application, and the list that he is putting up there is available on the EDALC website and will be available on the county's website once this meeting is over as well. And the list was created and shared with Paul and I at an economic development conference by a guy named Jerry Miller, who works for the Idaho Department of Commerce and has a lot of background in grant writing and creating applications as well. And so all of them are pretty beneficial, but we just wanted to go over just a couple that are more relevant to this specific application. So his second tip is develop good projects. And he has a quote in there that's, "We fund projects, not ideas." And I think that's important to keep in mind, is that before you're going to create your application, think about each step in detail that must be thought out and worked through prior to submitting your application to make your project work. So break down the project into individual tasks and then assign each a budget, a deadline, a person in charge, and how its success will be evaluated. Doing it beforehand will not only help you evaluate if your project is appropriate and ready for funding, but it'll also make creating your budget and viability section in all of your application a lot better if you break down your project into individual tasks beforehand. In addition, the Board of Commissioners have created this program to fund community economic development projects with the focus on job creation and retention. So in the development of your project, always keep that need in mind. Every single task should be necessary to reach your project's goals or address that original need that you're putting forth. And if you have supporting data regarding the need that you have or are addressing, or any data to support the job creation or retention that will happen as a result of your proposed project, you can attach that to your application at the end. Tip number 9, a good project description will tell the reviewer what you are doing, where you are doing it, why you are doing it, how much are you doing, and how you will be doing it. And it will be done in plain English. The reviewers should be able to interpret your project description, even if they have never heard of your organization or your work or your project before. So try to avoid any industry and technical language. And to that point, if it's possible, try to have somebody from outside your organization review your project description, just to make sure that it's clear and readable to the average person, because we can all get stuck in our organization's lingo and not know that we're saying words that the average person might not necessarily understand. Also, be concise and use very strong language in these project descriptions. There's a lot of information that needs to be shared in a very limited space. For the smaller projects, there's only 500 words available, and the larger words have 1,000 words available for these project descriptions. So in order to tell your organization's story while also keeping it succinct, try to use as powerful language as possible to grab the reviewer's attention and describe your project. Also, if you can use numbers to quantify your need or impact, try to use that whenever possible, because that makes it a lot clearer. And lastly, tip number 10 is about the budget, and it's triple check your numbers. Check them 4 times, 5 times, and make sure that your budget numbers match any references that you have to the budget in any other sections of your grant application, like the project description. And remember that these grants are not for operations, so make sure that every single expense is directly related to an activity necessary to reach your project's objectives. Your budgets, like Paul said, will be scored on the viability and completeness of your budget. So keep it in mind while you're preparing the budget, and make sure that your expense figures are realistic and include any other funding sources you may have and every single expense necessary for the project's completion. So like I said, all of those tips are available on our website under the Grant Resources tab. So yeah.
And I stuck the link, Sarah, to that document in the chat. And Leslie also asked if I could put the scoring criteria link, and that's the link up in front of that. Is the Community and Economic Development Fund Program Overview. So that's got the scoring criteria in there. Leslie, I was going to have you just quick introduce your resources for nonprofits. I'm going to put the link up there. And why don't you tell folks about that, just so it's another resource that they could look at for either this or other things down the road.
Great, thanks. As I mentioned earlier, I've been involved with the Social Service Agency Grant Committee for the past 3 years, in the process of trying to continually improve that project. The idea came of sharing free and extremely low cost resources for nonprofits, because we realize that every organization is at very different levels of capacity, and sometimes it just takes connecting folks with available free resources to really improve whatever they're seeking to improve most. So I have created a little screen sheet of some free and available resources online that have been really helpful, both to me personally and to other nonprofit groups I'm working alongside. And so, so that is a resource that's available. And true to form, whenever you create a nice document, then you find one more resource that didn't fit in there. So I'm also going to put a link to another one that I learned about recently that is called Rational Unicorn Legal Services, that has a free resource page. And then I think I'll mention the other thing I have to share at the tail end, Paul, correct?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Great.
Cool. Thank you, Leslie. And Rational Unicorn sounds like a little bit of an oxymoron there. Next thing I'm just going to talk about a little bit, but first I have to say odd keyword number 2 is aquaculture. There you go. I'm going to stick another link in there, and I'm going to quickly share this document. And Leslie used the term scream sheet that I've got our staff using, and basically it's a one pager that's got info on there. And this is also on the county website. This is something that we put together with some tips specifically for this grant program. And I'm not going to hit on all of them because Sarah hit on some of the most important stuff of general tips, but there's 3 things that I'm going to kind of extra highlight. One is that the project narrative for this grant application is very short. It makes it easy to apply to, but it makes it tough to tell your story. For the standard grant application up to $15,000, there's a 500-word maximum. For the impact project, there's 1,000 words maximum. That's not a lot of words. So I guess I would say don't waste your time on fluff. And one of the most important things, and we've seen this in some past grant things, you don't need to tell us 10 pages about your organization for the last 20 years. Hit on 1 or 2 things. Focus on the project itself. Focus on what you want to get done. So that's thing number 1. And the next tip I'm going to say, and this is just from working with our board for a couple of years on this, what they like to see, tell a good story. Make it compelling. Make this project feel like something that you can get behind and that you're willing to cheer for and be excited about. So show how it's going to make a difference and really tell that story. And the last thing I'm going to point out on this document is, because we hope there's going to be a lot of applicants for this grant pool, differentiate yourself and your organization. Tell us about yourself, not in all of the project description, but tell us, has your organization been around for a while? Have there been successful projects that you've done, successful grants? Help build the trust and the confidence in the reviewers and the commissioners that your organization is going to be worth investing in, and that your project is going to be worth supporting. And I'm just checking on chat here. And so those are, between those 2 docs and what Sarah and I were talking about, if you haven't been doing much grant writing, hopefully they can give you some of the tools to do an effective application. Along the way, if you're working on these applications, while it doesn't make sense and we shouldn't be reviewing your applications before they go in at all, if you have specific questions about something, Sarah, Leslie, and I are available to help you put together your great application. And then once the deadline's there, then we're purely in administrative mode. So the last thing I'm going to spend a little time on, and then we'll have some time for some question and answer, and Leslie's going to talk about another grant opportunity, is we're going to talk about specifically some tips for putting together the actual application on the county's website, because the tool that we're using this year is different from what was used last year. And if you've used Smartsheet or anything like Google Forms or Jot Forms or something like that, it's very similar to that. It's a form-based application that has some good points and it has some bad points. And so we're trying to mitigate those. One of the bad points is that it's not something like some of the grants.gov things where you apply and you create an account and you can go in and keep adding things to your grant and then click submit. It all has to be done in a single session, which means if you look at the overview document, or you can go on and hop up and look at the grant thing, you can see what you have to answer. And my recommendation is write your narrative in a word processor with those questions so you can copy and paste it, so you can be all ready to go and have your grant done. Now, the other thing that Smartsheet is horrific at, and we discovered this 2 years ago after the fact, is that if you put in a project budget, like you've done something nice in Excel, you copy your cells, you paste it in a Smartsheet, it sticks all of that great work into one single cell of a spreadsheet, which makes it virtually impossible to look at for a reviewer. And it's not the problem of anyone who's the applier, it's just a limitation for Smartsheet. So what we're asking for this time around is do your budget in whatever tool you want to do it in. Do it in Excel, do it in Google Sheets, do it in Word, and export your budget as a separate PDF document. And you'll have a chance at the end of the Smartsheet to attach your budget. So that will make it easy for the reviewers to read and look at. Now, the other thing is, Sarah mentioned, if you have some supporting data or things like that, that you want to have an additional supporting document, if they're in PDF form, go ahead and attach those. You can attach multiple documents at the end. The other thing I will say is one final criteria for the impact grant is that grant requires at least one letter of support. There could be multiple letters of support that would also be attached at the end. The other thing with Smartsheet is that, it's like with computers, just be zen about it. Be prepared before you go in there. If something screws up, you hit submit, you do something weird, don't panic, don't freak out. Send me an email. I'm the tech guy who's going to be managing all the Smartsheet things. I can make sure if something's messed up, but you want to submit it again, I can delete the bad submitted one and you can submit it again. So we're here to help. We're not here to be frustrated. One of the funny things that happened last year, which is part of why we're back to a different tool, is that we used a service that was actually located on the East Coast, and they didn't put the time zone in for when the grant applications closed. So they closed at 5 p.m. Eastern time, and there were at least 7 grant applications in the works at the moment it shut everything down. And boy, did my phone ring hardcore. So this time we're controlling all that. But the only thing I could really say is just prepare your stuff in a Word document. Budget is a separate thing, and don't stress it if you have technical issues. We're here to help and get you on your way as helpful as possible. And with that, I'm going to let Leslie talk about another grant opportunity, and then we will turn things over for Q&A and have you guys ask any questions you've got. Take it away, Leslie.
Thanks again. I was just asked to signal boost from the city of Newport, their nonprofit agency grant application process that's open and similar timeframe to the one you've got here. I'm going to add the files that you can download in the chat after I stop talking. Those are both in English and Spanish. I do apologize that this one is Newport centric, but for organizations that do help, multiple locations in Lincoln County, hopefully this could still apply. I also assume that they are asking me to signal boost it because they are hoping for more applicants. So again, I'm just signal boosting this. I don't have anything else to do with it, but you'll be able to contact Peggy Hawker at the city of Newport if you have any questions, and all that information will be in the PDFs linked here.
Great, thank you, Leslie. And you just hit on a really important point that's in the fine print, but I wanted to say, because I think most of us here are Lincoln County organizations, but if you are not based in Lincoln County, but are a nonprofit, you can still apply for this grant as long as the project work is in Lincoln County. So I just wanted to be kind of clear about that. And for example, is like Pioneer Cooperative, which is out of Philomath, is doing a project work in Walport. So that's why that worked there. And that is all you have to listen to the three of us, and Commissioner Jacobson's always a fount of wisdom. We are just the babbling talking heads here at EDALC. But any of you have any questions that we can either answer right now or research for you? And again, we've put our emails in the chat. And if you think of something after this workshop, you can absolutely contact us then. But anyone have any questions or commentary or anything? nice cocktail recipe for Christmas, eggnog, maybe. I don't know.
Misty has a question in the chat, if the recording will be posted somewhere that folks can reference later.
Yes, we will be, if you, once we get this all processed and turned into a YouTube-y thing, we will post the video up on our YouTube page, which is tough to find because no one's really looking for economic development YouTube pages, but it'll also be on our Facebook site, and we'll make sure we put a link of it also on the county webpage. And we do know who all is here, and we will make sure if you guys do submit an application that you will get credit for being here, for sitting at the front of the class, as it were. We will provide this information to other folks, but you guys get the maximum benefit for listening to us real time. Lucky you. Anything else? Wow. Well, thank you so much. I'm pretty impressed that we came in at 4 minutes under our goal time. Again, if you have any questions whatsoever along the way, just reach out to us. We wish you the best of luck. We want to see a ton of great applications and some great work done. And it's totally awesome to see local dollars staying local and the commissioners championing this. And we're honored to help them. This is our 14th year doing this with the commissioners. And thank you so much for the good work that you all do. And other than that, have a Merry Christmas, as long as you get your grant application in first. And we'll see you soon.
Thanks, everyone.